Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Megan Spalding, and I'm the director of the Albers Placement Center. I'll explain our office here in a minute, but welcome to the part 3 of our Courageous Career Conversation series that we've been doing since winter quarter. And it's been a really great series so far. And if you haven't attended the first 2, in a little bit, I will link to we have a playlist on YouTube that includes the past 2 workshops and some other Courageous Career Conversations workshops we've done in the past. So if you attended the first 2, welcome back. If you're brand new, welcome. You're in for a great treat today with our speaker. But the topic today for part 3 is how to bring your authentic self to work now that you have the job. And this really applies to, even if you're just going into an internship this summer or a part-time job, any kind of where you're starting to move into, or maybe you're in an organizational culture or structure right now, how do you navigate these tricky things around, how much can I be myself? And what are the organizational norms and culture expectations, and what's okay to do, and what's, just kind of how do I be here and navigate all these tricky nuances and things like that is what we're going to be talking about today. So like I said, I'm from the Albers Placement Center. I'm the director. We're the Career Center for the Business School. We are doing this event in partnership with our colleagues in the Career Engagement Office. So I know some colleagues, if you want to raise your hand, see some people, Carol and Aaron and Kiana are all here. And Career Engagement Office serves science and engineering students and arts and sciences students in nursing. So we have partnered on this all year, and we're really excited to bring this to you. So let me get to, let me give you a little bit of housekeeping. Kimfer will kind of go through the presentation. I think, are you okay with questions as they come up?
Yep.
Yep, we'll kind of go through questions. We'll see how we are in numbers. We might do a little bit of breakout room stuff. And then if you could stay muted, but if you do have a question, maybe raise your hand and you can unmute and ask it, or you can we'll be monitoring the chat the whole time as well. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. Kimfer Flannery Rye is the founder and principal consultant for Inclusion Equals. Inclusion Equals is a social enterprise focused on the IDEA. An IDEA is an acronym, all caps. It stands for Inclusion equals Diversity plus Equity plus Accessibility. And the whole goal of Inclusion Equals is to build culture from the inside out, so that we can address systemic issues, so we can tackle inequities within organizational systems. Kimfer is a seasoned professional with 20 plus years of experience with a diverse background in digital marketing, executive leadership, and organizational development, to name a few. She's currently an adjunct professor for the MBA program here in Albers. She teaches creativity and innovation. So if you are an MBA student, keep an eye out for her class. And she's also an alum of Seattle U. She did the Executive Leadership MBA, and she's also a mentor in our Albers Mentor Program. So we are very lucky to have Kimfer involved with Seattle U on a regular basis. So I will turn it over to you. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. I just realized that I have my my Kimism still up there. It's one and the same company. It's been rebranded to Inclusion Equals. So you're seeing both brands right now. That was a transition slide for me. But thank you so much, Megan, for the introduction. You got a little bit of my professional side, but I think some of you have been maybe with me this whole time, and this is part 3. But if it's the first time with me, I also like to just kind of introduce myself at a personal level. So that way, more than just like, oh, there's Kimfer's, resume over there. But instead, it's just that I share with you some of my intersections and who I am as a person. So I am a cisgender woman from South Korea. I'm an adoptee. And even though I'm part of the LGBTQIA community, I live what probably, it's called a heteronormative lifestyle, because I'm married to this man over here with the white hair. It's our 25th wedding anniversary. I know, it's amazing. I know you're amazed because you're thinking that I'm only 25, but it is not true. I am much older than that. And I have a beautiful 15-year-old son over here named Sawyer. He's over 6 feet tall. I don't understand where that height is coming from, but amazing. And I have a COVID dog named Yeti over here. He's been with me for 2 years. And our cat Roro or Rodeo could care less about my dog. And my dog wants to be best friends and be siblings, and Roro is just get away from me. So there's a little bit about me, and then you see me in various speaking engagements. I speak locally, virtually, nationally, and globally. And you see me over there in Davos, Switzerland for the Global Economic Forum, to an event called Learnapalooza that happens here for learning and development folks in the region. So that's a little bit about me personally. Here's the quick agenda for today. We're going to do the land acknowledgement, which is a very important aspect. We're going to go through learning objectives because it is a university. We always have to have learning objectives. I always love to start out everything with a shared language, so that way we know what we're talking about together. We'll talk about this particular session. Part 3 is about authenticity, courage, allyship, what we bring to that new job. We'll do, maybe we're small enough of a group, we can talk together, or maybe just 2 groups, Megan, to do a breakout session. Maybe 2 groups might be good. And we'll just do a debrief, or maybe 3 groups. And so again, back to land acknowledgement. Why is this important? I think for those of us, if you are part of the non-Indigenous community, land acknowledgement is really a way for us to show respect and honor the Indigenous people of the land, right? So here in Seattle, greater Seattle area, is we're really part of the Duwamish, Salish, and Muckleshoot tribes, but there's more, right? We know that there's more around the outside of that as well. But, it's more than just doing the acknowledgements. For me, it's all about like doing the work and taking action. And the way that I give back to the community is by paying real rent. In Seattle, you can pay rent to the Duwamish people, and I pay equivalent every month to what it would be to be at a co-working space. Since I'm a consultant, I don't need a office space, so I pay them the rent instead. All right, so with that, learning objectives here. So today's session, we're gonna assume that, that you went through, you got the job now, you landed the job, and what do you do once you're there? So hopefully by the time you leave this session, you'll get an understanding of how to balance your authentic and your professional self in the workplace, how to build and engage in courageous conversations with your colleagues, your managers, senior folks in the organization, and then hopefully explore ways how you can really create that culture of belonging. What's your part coming into that as an ally? Okay. So here's our little shared language. Obviously, this is a diversity, equity, and inclusion focused event in the series. So I know this is not new language for all of you, but I love this slide. And for those of you seeing it for the 3rd time, thanks for being patient with me. It's to make sure that those newly joining are also in this with us. This is my favorite 2 ways of really describing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously, there's like more textbook and dictionary versions of that, but I like this idea of, diversity. It's in all the ways in which people differ, right? And equity, fair treatment, access, opportunity, and all of that that is around that identity, right? And then inclusion is a variety of people that giving that power and the voice and decision. What I really like is these concise statements that are up there. Those are quotes by author Chan. If you don't know who he is, he's wonderful to follow on LinkedIn, always dropping some really amazing, succinct information around DEI. I really like this from him. Diversity is a fact, which is true. You can take demographics data. Equity is a choice you make if you want to live and present and do things that are in an equitable way. And then inclusion is an action. How do you bring those people in? And obviously, out of all of that, belonging is the outcome of it all. So that's my favorite in there. And we are going to think about culture as well, because everything around DEI, and if you're talking about work into your job, it's about the culture in that organization. So really, if you think about the company, the heart of that company is the culture, which means that you need to have strong diversity, equity, and inclusion being part of that, because it affects what you do and how you are as an organization are the individuals. And I've seen this over and over. It's the individuals in the organization are the first ones to call out BS about that organization and their brand if they're just putting it out there by words. Okay. And what's also important about culture, and this is for you as you think about entering in a new workplace, because what you're going to do is as you enter that workplace, you're going to copy what others are doing. You're going to possibly be coaching others because you got corrected. You might have gotten corrected verbally or just by looks, or however, you're going to absorb what's called an implicit organizational culture and values. Explicit are the ones that are defined in your policy and values, but really it's the absorption of that, the way that organizations do or how we do things around here is what really gets brought into it. So for you as an individual, it's important to kind of think about that as you enter the new workforce. Just a quick dip in for those of you who haven't done part one and two, that should say two, sorry, it says three, part 1 and 2, Megan will send out all the links to all the resources, because for me, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion is about bringing the practicality into everything that you do. So there's resources that are there to how to do an assessment, so that you know which company that you want to even apply to. And then once you apply to it, there's a way that you can go through the interview process to really find out more about that company that you can't throughout just looking at it externally. So here's the resources, just quick is what it looks like. You can see it's an audit list for that first one, and then a guide for you on the second one. And we'll get another resource today. All right, so let's talk about authenticity, courage, and allyship. Okay. So here's the thing about all of these things is that people use the phrase, bringing your authentic self to work. What does that mean? And how can you do that, right? And then what is professionalism? How do you sort of balance the two of those? And there's a great article out there by Jodi Ann Burry, who is also local. She's also in Seattle, has this great TED Talk about this idea of bringing your authentic self to work is BS when it comes to a lot of folks who are part of the BIPOC community, this part of the disabled community, and all of these other things, that it's not always safe possibly for them to bring that with you. And so the idea is not about you must bring your authentic self to work because it's complex. How are you willing to do that so you're not code switching or having to put on a performance? That's the difference. How do you not put on a performance in that scenario? And then also bringing your authentic self to work, which can be complex, that also means like, how can you have these courageous conversations? It's so much harder, right? When you are brand new into an organization, it can feel really daunting. Like, how do I have these conversations when I'm just trying to get the feels and making sure that my job is secure? And then on top of that, how do I even think about allyship in action in a new environment that could get awkward? Maybe they don't want me to be, speaking up for someone. What is the right, the right way, which we know there's no real right way. It's the effort and the way that you can show up for others. So the way that I break this down for us is looking at what is your level of comfort, right? And when I say comfort in DEI, we have to be careful that you're not just centering the comfort for yourself only, right? But this is about you entering in the business. So you do have to think about what is your comfort level. So two different things, from comfort level for you versus when we might talk about in an allyship perspective, right? And then what is your willingness in these three scenarios? What's too much for you? What's not enough? And that arc may change throughout your work career experience, right? What you might do in the first 30 days may be different from what you might do in the third year. And then also the feeling of empowerment, right? How empowered do you feel to be able to contribute intentionally into these three areas? Does that make sense for everyone so far? And if there are other thoughts or feelings around that, let me know as well. I always think of these sessions as it's a learning experience for me too, because there's always new perspectives that come in. So here's the three categories for you. So when we think about, I apologize, I don't want to mispronounce your name. So if you could let me know what your name is. And
Anshika.
Anshika, thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a camera to my
No
desktop.
worries.
Okay, so you mentioned that we should be evaluating the level of comfort. So any guideline, how can we evaluate that level of comfort, or you will be presenting in coming slides?
I will be presenting in the coming slides, but
Sure,
great question. Yeah. All right. I think Michael?
Okay. Can I go on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, okay, so for an international student who is coming into a new environment, for instance, there is this perception that you don't really fall into the culture of the new environment you're going into. So how, is there like a process or a system where people are being allowed to grow for a certain period of time, only to the fact that they have to learn the cultures and the norms of that place? And is there also various forms of mechanisms introduced by various organizations and also the institution to nurture international students so that they fit properly into the system? Bear in mind that originally they are not from that system.
Yeah, great question. So I want to be, so let's break out, when I say culture, two different things, right? So we've got culture from global, like global citizen culture, right? So maybe culture because of your ethnicity, for your nationality, various things that are culturally, that may be different than the US culture, right? So there's that culture that I think international students are going to have, you're going to have a multifaceted way of looking at culture. So there's that whole like, oh, I got to navigate through the US culture and what are some of those standards in the US sort of business culture. And then there's the organizational culture. Okay, organizational culture are the culture that's built within an organization that follows really their mission, their vision, and their values. So each organization has their own culture that is not necessarily, that is probably built on, because we're in the US here, on some US based culture, but really each company has its own culture. So I think one of the good questions for you, Michael, is back to, so we are, so you did not have to do sessions 1 and 2, but there is some assumptions that you have access to this before you even decide if you wanted to get a job at a place. Hopefully some of these assets that we created can help you How can you get as much of the culture and idea from that company while you're doing your research? Okay. And then the second part to evaluate the company is in this section where there is a questionnaire in which how you can try to extract even more information, right? So there's a go or no go on each one of those worksheets to kind of give you a sense like, do I even want to continue on? So hopefully you've gone and did some of these research initially, gave yourself an opportunity to have a go, no go. So by the time you get to a company, you already had sussed out some of these needs that you might have and how you can have the time, right? The time to understand the norms, the time to understand how that company culture really fluctuates and moves, right? So those are some of the things available for you. Again, Megan is putting the access to you there. So now that you get into the culture, Michael, I think this is also those things. There's some assessments that you need to do for yourself. So these are all personal assessments as you bring yourself into the company. Hopefully you've been hired in an organization that you already want to be part of, right? Hopefully you already had that scenario that you made some of these decisions like, ooh, that is not a company I want to work for because I don't think they're going to be giving me that time to absorb into a new culture of that organization. Okay. Just so, Michael, is that sort of enough context for us to move forward with this portion?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with your responses, but like, okay, so your responses are very fantastic. So you made mention about the cultures of the organization and they'll have to nurture you through a certain level so that you get fit into the system. Now,
Yeah.
bear in mind, like, you know, is what we have, you know, in this part of the world where you have people going into a new environment, like I made mention of, you feel not comfortable. That's why I asked the question that, is there going to be like a mentoring system? I, for once, will have a problem walking into a new organization because where I currently work, I have people, Americans there, I have Asians. So for me, it's not a problem. So I can fit into any system I find myself. But some other person might find it a little bit challenging because not understanding how you're able to relate with the other person from the other part of the world, what he or she believes in, what they don't believe in, what they like and what they don't like. So, like I said, I do not have any problem relating with anybody, regardless of race, culture, ethnicity, religion, also because I have had that experience working with them on a one-on-one basis, or rather on a daily basis. But like I said from the outset, some might have an issue with that. So how do we also nurture them so that they don't fall victim, they don't feel victimized that the system is not accommodating? The system doesn't accommodate them. So is there a process to help them navigate through that process?
Yeah. It sounds like someone else wants to speak up. Okay. Yes. So this is, I think the question you're asking is, if that all those pre-work didn't already happen and they're in a role. So I'm hoping that people go through that first rounds of process so that you are already eliminating companies that aren't going to put you in a scenario where you're can be more included and feel belonged in that culture, right? So but within, none of these live by themselves. And this is one of those things where it is important to know as an individual. And I know there's other kind of criteria that you have to think through, like oftentimes, like I gotta pay my rent. I have to be able to pay for my healthcare and all of this stuff. But there are moments where you need to, as an individual, go, is this the right organization for me? If they don't have the system set up for their own system set up for where their values, their culture, and all of that is going to accommodate everyone, in a way that's going to help them feel belonging, right? So those are sort of those scenarios that maybe that's the fourth one, Megan, is like, when do you decide and how do you decide? All that was said was not what you thought it was, etc. So I think it's a little bit more of a nuanced and detailed question, and but again, it's a little sometimes it's a little too late once they're there if their own organization isn't already set up with resources, with people, with like employee resource groups or policies that helps you sustain those things. So not a full answer, but I think I would highly recommend sharing some of those first round of resources with your friend for the next, hopefully for the next place that they might land. So I'm looking at this sort of assessment for yourself. So we're making an assumption here. You did the research. You were like, okay, I did some no-goes and goes, and this company made the go list. I did the interview. I also got to assess, like further assess that they were a go. Now I have the job. So now I have to figure out, like, I got the job. They appear to have the culture and the DEI and all the support that I felt was good enough to say yes to this job. Now, how do I bring myself to this job? Okay. So here's some of the lists that we're looking at. So the things around the comfort, willingness, and empowerment around bringing your authentic self to work. These are things that you have to think about. And this will be on that worksheet. Megan, you feel free to send that out to everyone so they can see what that looks like. So what you're going to do is look at this and go, okay, how comfortable am I willing to share all my personal identities? And that could be your, for me, I shared with you my LGBTQIA status. How comfortable do I feel about sharing that? And when maybe? Am I comfortable sharing maybe disabilities that you might have, visible or invisible? There's a lot of invisible disabilities. And various other identities that you might have. Your perspective. Are you comfortable? Do you feel empowered to share your perspectives on a lot of the different things? That could be religious, it could be political, it could be various areas in there, right? So your beliefs and values, how much of that are you willing to share and voice? What your personal boundaries, limitations, your work preferences or styles even, willing to talk about your strength areas for development, and areas for development, because sometimes you're like, I don't want to talk about my areas of development because I need them to know that I'm really great at this because they just hired me, right? What are your goals and your aspirations as you develop as an employee or in that organization or even beyond? How about even bringing your creative ideas and solutions? Where are you on this? So you'll see if you are able to download, so you can see on here, well, not very well, but you'll see, like, are you, your comfort level, is it low, is it medium, is it high? Willingness, is it medium, lower, and high? So it allows you to kind of go through this assessment for yourself, okay? And then around courage. Courage is about having those courageous conversations. Are you able to, or willingness to, or empowered to sort of like have that conversations of clarifying expectations that you might not understand? What about seeking feedback? Addressing specific conflicts that you're having? Advocating for yourself. That's a huge thing. People don't always do a good job of advocating for themselves and showing up with the accomplishments that you're doing, right? One of the things that I talk about when around performance review, I do a session around what you do during performance reviews and things like that. One of the pro tips that I always give everyone is keep yourself an annual deck or annual document so that you can sort of identify each time something is happening throughout the year, because oftentimes organizations do an annual review And there's a lot of biases that come in. One of them being a recency bias, meaning they'll remember maybe the last 3 months or maybe the 6 months of what you did, right? But maybe not from before. So there's all these things that you can do. Are you able to and have courageous conversations about mental health and wellness? Maybe about, are you willing to do that if you are feeling overworked or stressed, or about others, or what is that in the organization? What about challenging the status quo? That's always like, can be hard for new hires. However, here's the thing that I used to do with new hires is that I would ask them to document anything that seems like that is missing on your employee onboarding, things that seems confusing, all of that, because you only have fresh eyes once, and then you just get absorbed into the organization. So one of the things that you can think about is like, are you comfortable, willing, empowered to have these courageous conversations with your new hiring manager and say, are you willing for me to maybe document as I go through this onboarding process, what is really smooth and what could be improved for others that are coming into the organization, right? So these are the things that you can think about. Senior leadership, are you having conversations with them? People with position power, what about that? And then one of the other things as you get into an organization, it's obviously more than just you, right? So it's you, and then you will need to think about how do you now bring and make the culture more inclusive? How do you contribute to that organization? So are you, where are you on this line of what about when you're witnessing bias, discrimination, exclusionary behavior? That could be like exclusionary behavior could be in work scenarios, like you notice certain people are being left out in meetings, right? And why? Like the asking of the why, or things like that. Advocating for the needs of the marginalized community. What about ethical concerns that you see? Are you willing to join things like employee resource groups or business resource groups or affinity groups, even if it's as an ally, right? So that you can show up for others in allyship. So these are the things that are on this sheet here for you to think about, and the instructions that I have. And what do you think, Megan? Is this something that we should maybe do two groups?
Oh, either way, I've got them ready to go in 2 groups, but I don't know if people want to.
Yeah,
Do you want to
let's
see
do
what
that.
people want to do? Or do you want to do 2
Yeah.
groups?
Yeah, let's do the 2 groups. There's something about smaller conversations, and that I think it encourages more. So, okay, so introduce yourself in the group, and why you attended this session. Maybe have someone be the note taker for the group and someone to kind of talk and speak up for the group when you come back. We're small enough where we can all talk. And what I want you to do is look at that resources, discuss 2 or 3 questions, how much time you might have on each of those sections, and why and how, where you are in your state. And do you think that might change as you move through that organization or things like that, right? So looking at the time, Megan, what do you think? 10 minutes so that we have time to come back and do some debrief? Yeah, let's do 10 minutes. And then also, once you break out into the group, I'll come and bounce around a little and say hello and just kind of listen in. Okay.
Okay, I think I'm ready. People ready?
All right. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
Here it comes. Hopefully everybody has access to this form. If you don't, let me know.
I think everyone has access to the LinkedIn Learning, right? As a Seattle U.
No, only faculty and staff. Isn't that a bummer?
It is a bummer.
I don't know why they don't just must be a lot more money. I don't know if there's like, you know, a certain threshold of how many. I think as far as I know, that hasn't changed. That's what I saw before, but.
The other good training area is oh my gosh, what is it called? I don't know why I wanted to say Lydia, but that doesn't sound right. Does that sound right? It's
Like a
you get
training?
free, yeah, you get free access if you have a library card. It's
Oh,
awesome.
through King County?
Mm-hmm. And now I can't think what that is.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be good to know.
Mm-hmm. How many are students in there? Is there just a few? Just a handful?
Just a handful. 1, 2, 3, 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're missing out, Kimfer.
I know. That's how it goes. Yeah. But
This
as
is
far as
so
I'm concerned,
tricky.
even if we can get just a couple of people are like, oh yeah, that was great. And they can utilize it and share
Yeah.
the resources around.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay. This is when we get to talk together. And so let's do some debriefs. So I love to have some brave souls that are willing to speak up. How was the discussion? I know there's 2 groups. Group 1, how was the discussion? How was the guide? And where'd you land? Someone willing to talk? Yeah, Carl, go do it.
Sorry, I was like, who's group 1? Hi, Kimfer. My name is Carlo. I am in the Career Engagement Office. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm one of the Assistant Directors of Career Education. Thank you for hosting this. I finally had time where there's no students booking, and so I wanted to jump in as soon as I can. I had the wonderful opportunity to share space with Rachel, Wenting, and Erin, and through our introductions, we were kind of just discussing that this workshop as a whole is giving us a structure and a foundation to approach these types of things in future projects. It doesn't need to be in these existing systems, and they totally can. But even when it comes to, let's say, starting from scratch, and you're thinking of starting a new business or a new project, you'll have this as the groundwork for future work. So Rachel, thank you for that. That was Rachel's point. I don't want to.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah.
And then other things that we all kind of just thought about is just understanding, like, this is giving us a formality when it comes to assessing like business culture, company culture, all of that. But that willingness, empowerment is all about like assessing where you are in the moment, which I don't think a lot of worksheets do, right? Or structures like this and systems like this don't do, is they ask you, are you ready to do this, right? And I'm glad that that was the case here. We're able to kind of break it down together as a team to say, what parts of our identity, what parts of us do we want to bring forth, and what also do we want to keep safe? And so again, Kimford, this is like totally a reiteration of what you've been sharing. So we were able to just sit and process that together. So thank you so much.
Oh, great, great. It sounds like you had a really nice, deep conversation together. So that's awesome. Okay, group 2, what are some thoughts or insights or things that was juicy that came out for you? Who was in group 2 and willing to?
Although I don't want to speak because I'm part of this team. So I don't know if Lottie and Anishka, we lost Mike. Oh, there he is. Or Michael. Yeah, sorry, I saw that you popped off. Yeah, do you guys want to share some of your thoughts?
Okay, okay, so for us, it was more like having a sort of discussion about the culture. When you get into a new space, you feel a little restricted. You do not want to show your true self. The authenticity of your true self doesn't come up. You're more restricted. But like as time goes by, your true nature starts to you start exhibiting your true nature, and you start getting more involved in the cultures and norms of that organization.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think the important aspect for that is the more you understand about where you're at, how much are you willing to absorb, right? Or a shift. Shift would be what I'm trying to say is that is there certain lines that you have where you're willing to adjust because we're all learning and growing all the time, but there's assimilation, which is not always a good thing, right? When they want to assimilate you into the thing, which means this is something I usually say is that people hire for diversity and then they try to assimilate you for similarity, right? And so where do you, is that push and pull is what I think really what this is about. So the more you have sort of understanding about yourself and where you're at, the more you'll know, like, am I willing to, shift my thoughts and understanding, or am I being forced to assimilate, which is a different thing altogether. Yeah. Anyone else, what other things came up for you or have questions around this process?
I can share a few things what I learned part of our group discussion that
Yeah.
Rebecca summarized one thing and thing that resonated with me that that older self is more comfortable and confident than the younger self. I think with process, with more knowledge or more understanding of ourselves, that gives that courage or that intention that it's okay, we can share, we will be fine. And I can relate with this thing because I am more comfortable in sharing my thought than what I was 5 years back or 10 years back. I even did not think that, okay, these things are okay to share, or these things I should be thinking this perspective. So knowledge is definitely powerful. And I think that's what allyship will do, that when people are coming forward and they are spreading the knowledge, that's what I think this group is doing. This discussion is actually increasing the knowledge. But I am not part of allyship, but I would love to be part, being ally for some group or some where I can help it. But right now I am trying to understand my own boundary,
Mm.
and how can I ensure that, like, I and respect others boundary, so that other will also respect my boundary. But before that, I should understand what is my boundary, what I am okay, what I'm not okay with it.
Yeah, that's really great insights too, right? So again, I think what's interesting about this, early career, you're going to be different than maybe, mid-career, later in career. And also early in your new role, different than are you in the middle of that role in that company versus are you longer tenured in that company, right? So there's because you will probably have more relationships that have been built, others that have you've been willing to drop more information bit by bit and expanding that idea of like authentic self or more yourself. I think the biggest shift that's happened really if you think about in the last, I don't know how many years, is this idea of like, leave personal life at home, bring your professional life to, professional home. That line has been removed altogether. And so it's the idea of the big discussions that I often hear right now is like, for those of you may know the language around code switching. So code switching happens a lot especially for people in the BIPOC community, right? So you may have like talking about more at the culture, like the global culture level, you're shifting to fit into what we would consider the US that has been built in sort of the white supremacy culture, right? So you've got that going on in that code switching. What I've heard before when people say, oh, well, everyone code switches because it's called professionalism. And I was like, no, that's not what that is. No. Okay. So I think really as individuals thinking about this idea of what is leadership presence or professionalism and all of this, and then what is bringing my authentic self to work. So the other extreme that I like to say is like, hey, and I'm going to use a bit of stereotypes, and we typically do not do that in DEI, but I'm just going to put a little bit of a safe border, hopefully, around this. So a lot of in Seattle, a lot of startup tech company culture, like you can show up with a hoodie, you can show up with your flip-flops if you want, you can come in and, with your whatever, like just that's considered their professional work outfit. So using that as saying like, you are bringing my authentic self in my sweatshirt and my flip-flops and my, like all of that, I'm going to go into a company and you just have to accept me as my whole authentic self, is not being professional. If that is not the, like a work standard for that company. Does that make sense? And I don't mean like, now I have to culturally shift myself and I can't wear my cultural standard of clothing to this company because they're using professionalism as a code word to like remove that. There's a difference in the way that you think about how you bring yourself. What is that authentic self? It's not necessarily about like, I can be everything all the time. There is that level of what is appropriate, but not, again, because of the assimilation requirements that they're putting on you. I know this is a bit of nuance, but I think that's a really important aspect to think through as well. So did anyone come to some of the other sessions, and how, if you have, how's the build on this thing for you? New folks today? Any other thoughts or questions? Because we have 1 minute left and just want to be available for you if you do. I mean, besides, of course, you can tell me how awesome I am or this session was.
If I was just going to add on, I think in that professionalism conversation, I mean, that's part of the research and the looking into these opportunities, right? Like if you feel like that culture, that organization standard is XYZ dress or XYZ how you write an email or whatever it is, trying to get that information ahead of time, because if that is going to feel constrictive and oppressive, probably good to know that, right? I mean, is that kind of that's what people should be thinking around? Like if that really is going to hinder you feeling comfortable. Some people, that kind of like the dress expectation doesn't matter, but some people it really does. And so I think just kind of being mindful of what are those expectations and how much is that going to impact your feeling authentic and comfortable.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, Megan. Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely. So those are some of this. I mean, there's some companies that even in Seattle, you are required to wear, if you're male presenting, to wear tie and suit. And so for some people are like, that is not how I want to show up every day. That feels too constrictive. And as cool as that job is, like that sort of hits my boundaries, right? So those are things that you definitely can think through for sure. Again, hopefully you have an opportunity to do those steps before you even make it into that company, right? So that's what that first two workbooks and worksheets that we have for you is to kind of go through that process before you get here. So yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to be mindful of time and just thank you. And thank you for doing all 3 parts and putting so much effort and work into these and giving us these awesome resources that people can continue to use. I would, if people like kind of want more, they can go to your website, right? Follow you on Instagram.
Yeah,
for sure. Instagram, and all your content on Instagram is super helpful. So if you guys want more of this, definitely check out and follow Kimfer. And we will put this, we'll add this to the YouTube channel link. So if you want to watch it again or share it with somebody, hopefully you kept those links to the resources online, and we'll include those with the YouTube video as well. So
yeah, definitely follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm constantly dropping micro-learning tidbits. So yeah.
Great. Thanks everybody for joining today. We hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks, Kim.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.